All right, so as you all know, the debt ceiling crisis is getting more and more complicated, more and more acrimonious. And I think I just wanted to say a couple of words on what's going on. And it really came through. I was listening to Rachel Maddow's show from last night this morning, and she was talking about how it's really a self-made problem. And the reality is that the House could literally, be called to session, say we're passing a bill to raise the debt limit by a few $100 billion as a stopgap measure. They could send that to the Senate. The Senate could sign it. The President could sign it. Problem solved. I mean, it's really that easy. But what's happened is Republicans are tying any increase in the debt limit to cuts for the budget deficit, which is ironic considering that over the last decade, they refused to pay for anything, whether it was Bush tax cuts that turned into the Obama tax cuts, or, the Iraq War, Afghani War, nothing ever was paid for. And, now they've decided to put their foot down. They've decided that now's enough after a decade of them, spending on the credit card, that it's time to shut that off and save, the deficit in the budget. And so they've really kind of created this crisis. And, so basically they said there has to be a deficit reduction as part of us raising the debt limit. But then the second component to that was then they've said and taken the line that we're not going to add any tax cuts. So really what they're saying is, over the last decade, we've spent trillions of dollars in unfunded spending on wars and tax cuts for the wealthy. But now that it's time to, get our fiscal house in order, we're going to do that by cutting spending on everybody else. And what I love is that the Gang of Six plan, which is sort of this great compromise by 6 members, 3 on each side in the Senate, and sort of supported by President Obama, includes lowering the top tax bracket, I think, to 24%, which is brilliant when you consider that most large corporations, Rachel Maddow did a great segment on this, don't pay the top tax bracket through certain, corporate welfare policies in the tax code and by Congress. Some of these guys are paying 15, 18%, which is mind-blowing. And at the same time, Republicans are still holding to the same failed policy that tax cuts for the rich and corporations, or our so-called job creators, somebody did a great piece on it where Republicans won't even call the rich anymore. They're job creators, as if everyone who has money owns a business, and that letting them keep more of their money, they're going to hire. And Rachel Maddow did a great segment busting that theory wide open, where all these corporations who had more profits than they've ever had before were still laying off people. And it's a simple business thing. It makes sense if you're running a business, if you can continue your productivity and your income with fewer people, that raises your margin, raises your profit. It's not a hard concept. And so I think Republicans are laboring under this misguided ideal that, General Electric is saying, I only need $2 billion in profit this year. And so everything else, I'm going to invest in workforce. And that's not how it works. Corporation's going to say, well, if I can do this well, I'm going to continue pushing and see how much money I can get with a smaller staff. And that's smart business. But it's also dumb tax policy for us to say, why not have us actually tax you at our 35%? And let's see how that goes. But no, so the Republicans are tying any increase to, drastic cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And so it's basically a policy argument, and it's the position of the Republican Party that it makes more sense to give money, or Republicans like to say, let them keep their own money. Yeah, but we're in, one of nearly every society in which we have taxes, and that's how we fund essential programs and the government. So, let them keep more of their money while we do cuts to people who are actually living on these benefits to survive. Programs that they've paid into, and I understand there are problems with how much money is being taken out versus how much money is being spent. And that's why you reform these programs, especially over time, but you don't cut benefits to those who are in retirement or near retirement, one. And you make sure that when you're doing these cuts, the people who live on these programs, who have them to survive, aren't being put in jeopardy. Because then what you're doing is you're actually putting the people who actually spend their money in jeopardy of not having the money to spend, and it makes no sense at all. And so really what's going on is, President Obama's kind of made some threats that, not all of our bills will be able to get paid, and that's actually just a fiscal reality. With the money that's being taken in the end, without any new debt, we cannot pay all of our bills. It's like a household who suddenly finds somebody out of work. And yes, they still have money to keep electricity on and food on the table, but they don't have money for their car payment anymore, or their student loans, or their kids' private school tuition. It's easy to kind of think, well, let's just pay Social Security and service our debt and not worry about food stamps or the FBI or troop payments or VA benefits or all these other things that have to be paid. Yes, there are essentials that will have to be prioritized if Congress can't get its act together, but there's sort of this Republican delusion that we can just stop paying some of our bills and we'll be fine. The government spends a huge amount of money, and it's a huge part of our GDP, and with that money not being spent, it's not going into the economy to kind of stabilize our fragile recovery. I mean, we gained almost no new jobs last month, despite the fact that we have extended Bush tax cuts in place. But, if we stop government spending, that's going to be huge. And if we were to default on any of our loans, or if Moody's does downgrade our debt from a AAA to, a AA, I always thought those were battery sizes, but whatever, that'll have an effect. And if, interest rates go up, they go up on people's credit cards and car loans and home loans and anything where you're borrowing and you're getting a % APR. If the government's having issues, any of those things that are government backed, interest rate skyrockets. And I thought we were supposed to be trying to keep money and credit rolling, not cutting it off. So I guess if you're looking for a party to blame, it kind of comes down to sort of House Republicans. I don't think Senate Republicans are that much better. But I think it really comes down to this sort of, I think there are those, and they probably won't admit it, who literally are hoping for default just because of the political ramifications it would have for Obama, that they think that if they, go on our complete financial meltdown, the U.S. not being able to borrow money to pay all of its bills, that he'll suffer such a big political hit that they'll win. I think that's chicken. I think they're playing chicken. I mean, they rose the debt limit, 18 times under Ronald Reagan, 7 times under Bush, but now they've suddenly got some kind of fiscal backbone and they're saying enough's enough. I mean, it's hard to not see this as political. If they were truly concerned about the fiscal health of our country, they would have pushed for, paying for the Bush tax cuts and the Iraq and Afghani wars. And they would have, pushed for a balanced budget amendment when Bush was in office, when they had the House, the Senate, and the White House. So it's hard to see it as anything more than political posturing. I don't think they're doing it out of, sort of this ideological, it's for the good of the country, because they had time to do that and they didn't. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm getting frustrated because I think they're not taking it seriously. As I turned on Fox News while I was at the gym to just you got to keep an eye on these people sometimes because some of them are kind of crazy, like Representative West from Florida. But I turned on the TV and 55% of Fox viewers don't think that failing to raise the debt limit would be I forget the wording of the poll, but it was disastrous or very bad for the economy. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it would be. I mean, if you default on a credit card, it's an absolutely disastrous impact. So I'm not too thrilled about what's going on, but we'll see what happens in the next 2